I think the way we're sourcing data is much more efficient than even what we see from incumbent data providers and even, like, say, Thomson Reuters.
Hello everyone, this is Alexandre from Gains, and today I'm joined by Paul Claudius from DI Data. Please introduce yourself. Who are you? What have you done before crypto? And what's your crypto story?
I have a management and finance background, so I was quite early on attracted to tech, e-commerce back then. I think my crypto moment was unconsciously 2013 by acquiring Bitcoin, but forgetting a bit about it. It took me a bit longer to actually realize what I did there. When I understood the implications blockchain has on, for me, it was most interesting on finance. It kind of pulled me in, and I needed to switch full-time gears and join back. So around 2017, started to work with my co-founders on that. Back then, we built basically like passive investment products, so smart contract that holds a basket of assets. And during that time, we were kind of looking for transparent pricing data because you need this to calculate net asset value. So how much actually is this product currently worth? And this was kind of absent. So we pulled that data ourselves from order books, from centralized exchanges, running nodes. And we had kind of a modular infrastructure internally for reporting using API for the smart contract itself and Oracle. And then basically people asked us, hey, can you share this and that? And this was kind of the founding story of DIA. So this wasn't like sketched on just a PowerPoint presentation and saying, hey, I think there's an opportunity in data, but this was just our little use case, and it grew from back then, yeah.
So maybe could you tell us like the full range of projects that might need that information to let us know how big the market can be?
There's a data provider. So what do? We're sourcing data, off-chain, on-chain data. We're pulling this data in off-chain database in a secure environment. So data can't be tampered, but it's much more efficient, we believe. And then we're delivering this data through different delivery methods, APIs, Ethereum oracles, now working on other cross-chain integrations, always trying to find the most efficient distribution of that data, because an ETH oracle is probably like one of the worst data delivery methods when it comes to the cost it creates and obviously also the frequency. So it has limited use cases. What DIA kind of differentiates to other data providers, oracles out there, is our approach of how we're sourcing data. So it's kind of an easy analogy because everybody kind of knows how the process looks like. We're always saying, hey, this is kind of like a Wikipedia approach. So we're using the crowd to source that data and to validate that data. So what are the use cases? You could say they're kind of like limitless, because there's not only in DeFi a need for data, but also in the traditional world. I think the way we're sourcing data is much more efficient than even what we see from incumbent data providers and even, like, say, Thomson Reuters. And then obviously we have different delivery methods. So we are, though, very much focusing on the DeFi space because there's an immediate need. And with this method, I think we're actually contributing to a next wave of DeFi projects out there who require more than just a standard set of data predefined an ETH price. I think our approach in the sourcing of data is very efficient, and it also translates into transparency, because when you need a price, you define it, what you need exactly. Somebody else delivers it, the integration, and then it's being validated. So you have basically really from the first request until the data itself, an audit trail of where this data is actually coming from. And I think this transparency is very beneficial for the space. So the crowd is not providing the data, but they're providing the integration or the sourcing. And then they can also provide the methodology. We have crypto pairs. They are weighting different order books from exchanges. So we're pulling here for this weighted average on crypto pairs from the relevant exchanges, such as Binance as well, this order book data. Then we conduct outlier cleaning. There's a very transparent methodology on what is actually being done with that data. So everybody can really understand where does it come from, and how do we end up with the price point. So this can be valuable because it kind of mitigates, for example, a flash crash scenario where one price point can be tempered, because with this outlier cleaning and averaging, you derive at a pretty solid price point.
How are you different from other oracles projects?
When we created and set up DIA early 2018, we kind of took the learnings in Switzerland. The Swiss exchange is owned by the Swiss banks because they provide payment infrastructure, the exchange itself, so all these rails which are very crucial for conducting the business. And we thought, okay, oracles, we learned that back then for ourselves, they're kind of relevant for almost every product. As this is integral infrastructure, stakeholders should have a say. And this is why we put it into a Swiss association, which is the perfect legal framework to create a DAO. And through this DAO, having stakeholders have a say in where actually DIA goes in the future. So I think on a governance level, we're seeking to be quite decentralized. So this year we'll have the first votings really on a governmental level. That's number one. Number two is on the product itself. I think Wikipedia showed that a crowdsource approach is stronger than even having the smartest minds sitting at Encyclopedia Britannica and trying to put all the relevant content together and updating it yearly and growing as fast as they can. This has limitations. So I think our decentralized process in adding new data sources with the onboarding as well as the validation is a true differentiator.
So let's say I'm a crypto enthusiast and I like DIA. How can I get involved and participate?
As a token holder, you can participate in these upcoming governance decisions. You can also contribute by adding data sources. So there's always a bunch of tickets out there for data to be added, and join this crowd of contributors we already have today. And we're luckily growing more faster now, as I guess there's more attention on DIA itself in the past months than, let's say, a year ago. Also, if you're building a project or if you're a developer and you have some idea on open source building blocks in mind, we have a program called DIA Labs, where we have two types of projects we basically want to support. The first one is pre-seed projects, when they're in a phase basically they have the architecture in mind. They started with the development, and this is usually the time when they also think, okay, we need an oracle here. Here we obviously help with the integration, but we're also providing financial means to build out the product to the next level, so they'll be able to ship and go into a seed, whatever that might be, through traditional ways or through crowd approach. The other one is really open source building blocks where we believe they can contribute to the DIA ecosystem, but also the larger ecosystem. There are other building blocks which not every team needs to develop themselves, like adapters, cross-chain functionalities, and so on. And we're basically handing out grants so they can be built on an open source license so everybody can use them.
So you mentioned that the governance will be a governance token. Do you have a few examples maybe of what people might be able to vote on?
So it's not only a governance token, but it also has functionality on the product level. The validation of data and really the usage of the token will be strongly embedded in the product. And we'll see this in Q1. We expect this to work quite seamlessly. We'll obviously have different voting mechanisms, as, for example, governmental decisions here awaiting on your total holdings makes sense, while, for example, on product stuff, per wallet votings to engage a larger community. So basically, the voting will be on the reserve tokens. I think everybody is always looking to decrease the supply of a token as a token holder. So I guess there's a tendency also what we read and hear back from the community.
Cool. How much did you raise? How did your raise go?
We did a bonding curve in August. We looked at different mechanisms of how you can basically come up with a good price, because price discovery requires a certain amount of people agreeing on the price. So if just we agree on DIA being worth a cent or $100 doesn't really create a market price, right? It's just as one transaction possibly. So you want to aggregate this, and we saw a bonding curve as a great mechanism, because in a bonding curve, you have a certain price range, which starts, at least the way we designed that shape, at a low price and goes up in lying S curve we had here, with an inflection point when prices increase a bit faster. During this bonding curve, you can buy, but you can also sell back those tokens to the issuer, hence us. And we did this over quite a long time frame. And I think this worked quite well for us. So I think we found quite a stable price point. I think we had, obviously, as always, timing was surely good during that pretty bullish period in time. So we raised around 15 million USD. Most of the costs are still denominated in fiat for salaries, infrastructure costs, and so on. We have quite a conservative approach of how to hold these assets.
I'd like to go back quickly to the token. Maybe as an investor, will there be mechanisms of supply and demand, scarcity, maybe burn? Will the token be needed to pay for the services? Could you tell us about this?
I think over time we'll see the total supply being reduced as it's in the hand of the token holders. Talking about the functionality of the token, it's part of the product and regarding to the validation. And we are seeing now already also interest in how this token is being used in regards to becoming a collateral, but as well in how can this token being used in our ecosystem to ensure the validity of data being provided, with new stakeholders joining.
You've had quite a number of partnerships recently, right? With pretty hyped projects like Headget, Anchor, and many others. That's good, right? I mean, we all know Chainlink is having partnerships with pretty much all the crypto space. How are these partnerships working, and are you looking to partner with many projects like Chainlink?
We want to build a product that provides value to a lot of projects out there. So this is really our belief, to make this data very accessible. This is also part of how we design the whole infrastructure. How can we make it as efficient as possible, that we have little or no costs for the data? All the partnerships you're mentioning, especially the ones on the dApp side, it's the best feedback, fast feedback on the product you can have. We're trying to make the process of adding new data sources extremely easy, but also obviously the integration part. And here we're learning, obviously, with these integrations, okay, how can we have a really zero friction process, that especially also for all these new upcoming projects. And as we're building out our infrastructure and also the accessibility of the data, so not only Ethereum restricted or off-chain as a limitation, but also bringing this data to different ecosystems, where we'll have a couple of news to share in the upcoming weeks in this year, so to say. I think this will further enhance the speed and also the amount of partnerships.
So do you have like a dashboard or an idea of the volume of data people are querying from DIA?
With the Oracle, no. So we're basically broadcasting those price points. They're not pulled, but they're just being transmitted. We'll have some changes here also to make NOx standard data very accessible in an efficient way. And I think through these design changes, we'll learn a bit more on the demand on the data itself.
I'd be curious to know a bit more about what do you think crypto is going to be in 5 to 10 years? I mean, we're seeing lots of change recently, right? Like institutional people are starting to invest. We've seen recently the 50 million from Square, of course. Many people are talking about CBDCs. What do you think about all this?
Probably we won't differentiate between crypto, non-crypto, and traditional finance the way how we today putting these borders. What's the difference? So regulation, possibly, and then a technology stack. But the use case is much more important, I believe. So I think we'll look at it from a different perspective, and there won't be like, is this really off-chain, or is there like some off-chain component in the infrastructure? Doesn't really matter. I think we'll look at it much more from a use case perspective, and then these boundaries between CeFi and DeFi will somehow blur. People will at some point, I think on a broader level, question what's fiat currency. And I'm like not an anarchist. No, I'm not against euro or US dollar. I mean it's a great mechanism for transactions, but maybe it's not the best one for holding and storing wealth over time. I think we have like a false sense of security, especially in Europe, that fiat currency is like a great way of saving. And I think there's an inflation which we don't account for correctly, because the basket to calculate that inflation rate it's not true. It's not like a sack of rice or something, but probably not the relevant basket of assets. And we see equities and house prices going up, and in Europe still a lot of people are holding fiat. So like in the next years to come, I think people will be just probably more conscious, as technology will enable also other assets to transfer in a transactional way, that fiat, for example, is not the only way to do that. So I think this will all somehow blur, and benefits from maybe fintech and usability of neobanks will be something to learn for blockchain applications. I think we already saw this with DeFi becoming much more accessible to people, like from a UX perspective. The composability and the settlement part, something fintech will take over. So I think in the end will be all somehow the same.
Interesting. I hope it comes to fruition. Do you have a few books to recommend, maybe, that you've liked?
The last was a good book I just read, The Reluctant Fundamentalist. I just finished it yesterday. I think there's so much great content out there on a business side, and I think a book is really not a medium that's helpful for the speed at which we innovate in the space. So I'm reading most fiction in my free time to get my mind a bit off the industry, where I guess everybody's, if you're involved in it, you're like, I don't know, 24/7 in it. So just to have a bit of a different perspective, because sometimes it feels we're like these tiny amount of people in the world who are living in like kind of a parallel world. This is kind of my way to go back into the other one.
Paul, that was a pleasure to learn more about DIA. Is there anything else you'd like to share about what you're up to, your plans for the future, maybe?
As we just started last week with DIA Labs, that's like my activation speech here. Please reach out to apply if you fall into the bucket of projects in early stage, you're just starting to build out, or if you're a one-girl developer and you have a vision idea of a building block which is relevant for people out there, just ping us on Telegram, send us a mail. I think we're quite open, approachable, react fast. Would be great to have you guys involved there. And apart from that, if you want to learn more about DIA, Medium is a good place to start. We have a community group. There's some unofficial communities on various topics being managed by the broader DIA space. Do check those out or ping us directly.
All right. Thank you, Paul. We'll see you then on Telegram, on Medium, for people who want to learn more about DIA.
Perfect, Alexandre. Thanks so much. It was really a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yep. See you, everyone.